Well, good morning, everyone. Let me say what a great pleasure it is to be here, to be able to contribute towards the success of this symposium organized by the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy here in New York at this very historic moment when the United Nations is celebrating 70th anniversary, when the Pope of Rome is visiting, and so many organizations are organizing conferences, seminars, etc. I arrived here about a few days ago, and yesterday delivered a speech at the New York Institute of Technology on the question of education. And I focused my address mostly on the fact that man must now be very careful that we do not become slaves of machine, slaves of new technology. All these machines were invented to be at the service of man, but what do we see today? The buildup of robots, a big menace in terms of those who are seeking for meaningful employment. There's no doubt that we are now in a crossroad of a situation where we must have new thinking. Where are we going? What do we want? What is the essence of life? What are we trying to achieve? Perhaps there we'll go to the point of the need, for example, for us to focus more on human contentment as opposed to human economic progress by itself. I think it is certainly wrong sometimes for us to disturb the simple life of, say, an African family who is living in the country in Africa, who wakes up to the sunrise, who has a challenge to go and look for food, to do a bit of hunting, sleeps to the setting sun, to the roar of the lions, to the songs of birds. This man is relatively happy until one day he sees a film of CNN about the rich and the famous. And then he believes that if you are living on the 50th floor of an apartment in New York, you are nearer to God. He doesn't realize that you've got to take a lift to get there. He doesn't realize that there's no common ground for the children. And at night, instead of sleeping to the roar of the lions, the song of birds, he sleeps to the tune of fire engine and ambulance. Ooh. The United Nations over the years have been issuing what they call Index of Economic Progress of Nations. I think we should now go along the way of an index of human contentment. In the context of human, in the pursuit of happiness, I do believe that peace of mind is a very essential factor in considering the quality of life of an individual. You can have all the money in the world, you can have a bed made of gold, but if when you fall asleep, try to fall asleep on this bed, you are disturbed. This fellow sleeping on the floor and have a good sleep has a higher quality of life than you. We speak about cultural diplomacy. I think the age of cultural diplomacy has come because there's no more victory in war. It is Charles de Gaulle who said at the Second World War, la France a perdu une bataille, mais la France n'a pas perdu la guerre. France lost a battle, but France did not lose the war. Because there is no more victory in war anymore. In fact, we have now gone to a situation where, as we know, man has the power to destroy the world. Nations have built up nuclear capacity. And there we go along the road of the sad politics which have prevailed over recent years. The politic of might is right, as opposed to the politic of right is might. Now there comes the need, therefore, to face these issues honestly. And what instrument do we have? Churchill said, talk is better than war. And that, I believe, is behind the philosophy and the spirit of cultural diplomacy. The world today has become a village. Instant communication. What goes on in New York, a few minutes is being flashed to all parts of the world. And all of us, irrespective of where we come from today, can contribute, can participate in terms of the need to change the world. Now, I come from perhaps the tiniest nation in the world, but I've had the bravado of climbing up. I always took the view that no country is small if it is surrounded by the sea. Now, when you come to a place like Seychelles, we're 120 small islands spread over a very wide surface of the Indian Ocean. Now, the United Nations law itself, Law of the Sea Convention, we have jurisdiction over 200 square miles around each island. So our maritime space is as huge as the Federal Republic of Germany. So therefore, we contend we have a right to speak our mind. And I dare say today that with modern media, modern communication, we should not hesitate to speak our mind. If we're taking part in roundtable discussions in Washington, D.C., which CNN is focusing to all parts of the world, well, let's say I'm representing the Seychelles, General so-and-so, the United States, Ambassador so-and-so, France, etc. Now, CNN is beaming this program to all parts of the world. And there on the island of Fiji, there's this man who's watching and listening. Now, the individual has a common sense antenna, and he can say, this man from Seychelles is speaking with his heart and mind. But this general from the USA is a bullshitter. He's playing propaganda. So we all belong to the same world. It's becoming smaller and smaller, and a lot of problems have got to be addressed. It's important, I believe, that we ask ourselves, where do we want to go in this world? Today we have the problem of piracy, the problem of immigration, the problem of democracy. Certainly, one must be honest and ask certain questions. Can Africa wait for the maturity of democracy? Can India wait? Or is India in an advantage position when, for example, you compare it to China? Now, I went to Shanghai, and in Shanghai, what has the Chinese done? Through the politics of central command, in about a few years, they built up the city of Shanghai to rival New York. It's so impressive what they've done. Now they've done it because of the politics of central command. From Shanghai I flew to Bombay, Mumbai, trading capital of India. I was guest of the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce of Bombay, who invited me to a reception. The reception was taking place at his home, which is a penthouse in a modern building. But as I stood out on the balcony of this penthouse, looked down, it was surrounded by a big shanty town. My host explained that this was so because the city council has been elected by shantytown dwellers who were very happy with their thoughts. So it was very difficult to democratically, if you want, break down this shantytown and give value to that area. I say this because I do believe that when we speak in terms of democracy, one man, one vote, and today, where do we really find democracy? Is the United States truly representative of a democratic situation? In the United States, you've got all this television, all this press, every issue is debated as it happens. Yet there comes an election and you see candidates raising money to fight the election. What is this money for? If it is not to manipulate the mind of other people by theater, etc., etc. Where lies the answer? Well, there again comes the question of going along the line of cultural diplomacy so that we can start talking and realize that finally in the world, those of us who are really mindful of a better world must accept the fact that we have more common grounds to realize that our areas of agreement must be far wider than our areas of disagreement, and that finally we're all aspiring to the same objective, a better world where we can live in peace and in happiness. Now, the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy, which was founded by Mr. Don Fried, is gaining more and more recognition, more and more momentum, and I'm glad to see so many people now are thinking, what is this cultural diplomacy all about? But I think we're at a stage where you, young people, all together, must assist us in bringing this discipline to the forefront of human governance. Young people, I remember when I was leaving the Seychelles to go and study law in London and then in Paris, my father had written on a small piece of paper some lines of encouragement. It said, "Jim, your future lies before you like a sheet of virgin snow. Take care how you tread on it, for every step will show." Well, I think the challenges of being in New York, for this matter in any big cities, is one which is very educational, and I am jealous that I'm not of your age, so that I could myself become even more active than I am at the moment. As Mark said, I happen to be discharging a lot of portfolios. We'll be back in the States in a few weeks to participate in the Savannah ocean exchange, where we're trying to find solutions to the world's problem of the ocean problem. There we offer two prizes, $100,000 to the students or university or group who comes forward with one of the best solutions. Afterwards, I'll be going over to Belgrade. I've written a few books, and I'm glad to say that the European Council of Peace Development has decided to give me an international award, and then coincidentally to publish a Serbian version of this book. It's a big challenge to try and dry the water of hate which swims between Kosovo and Serbia, but the two nations must realize that they are committed by geography to live side by side. Now, if you live in a household with a lady, wife or partner, you must start speaking to each other. You cannot say, I'm not going to talk to you. Can you imagine a situation where you are living in the same household and then can talk to each other? But the same thing applies in terms of nations, where there's internal conflict. And you see along the route of cultural diplomacy how nations sometimes have got to adapt to situations where even justice is put aside in the national interest. Let's see, for example, the situation which happened in Kenya. Now, Kenya, during the course and furtherance of an election campaign, there was a civil strife, as a result of which so many people lost their lives. Then the commission of inquiry was established, and it was found that the party responsible was the ruling party, mostly made up of Kikuyu, under leadership of Uhuru Kenyatta. So suddenly what did we find? International Court of Justice indicting Uhuru and calling for him to appear at The Hague to face charges of human rights violation. But Uhuru, before going there, decided time to hold an election in Kenya. Not surprisingly, since the Kikuyu had a majority, he won the election. Now, throughout all the problem concerning this issue, the United States have been 150% on the side of the International Court of Justice, that Kenyatta should go and face the charges at The Hague. But now there was an election, and what was the consideration in terms of American national interest? It was the fact that China was making a lot of headway in Kenya. And if they kept on boycotting Kenya, then Kenya will totally follow the influence of the Chinese. So overnight, what did we see the situation? President Obama accepting the invitation of Kenyatta to visit Kenya. And at that meeting, there was no mention of all these problems about violation of human rights. So you see, this is just an example I'm giving against the background of my experience that sometimes, in order to move ahead, we must be ready to do certain compromise. And that's very nice to see more and more people are coming to attend. I see this gathering.
With good speakers, we attract.
The point is, I belong to so many organizations in different parts of the world, and this question of cultural diplomacy has a relevance to most of the problems. and I could speak and speak and speak, but maybe it would be better if I stand ready to try and answer any questions which you people may have. My good friends, I'm sure if you're interested in cultural diplomacy, you are interested in peace, you are interested in a better world, a more equitable world. Whereas now we are living in a world of turmoil, a world calling for answers to many problems. So long as we're talking, as I said, it's good. So long as you're in the running, destination is out of mind. It's only when you stop and start thinking, for every question you can find 100 answers. And for every answer you can find 1,000 questions. And that is when you start to face your solitude. That is why a sense of philosophy is very important. The man with philosophy is a rich man. The rich man without philosophy is a poor man. Sometimes we must be ready to sing, "The answer, my friend, is blowing with the wind." So let me try and give you some answers to questions which you may ask against the background of the silent man which I am, who has had the audacity to publish his biography under the title of Seychelles Global Citizen. Please, questions?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. And what I would suggest for the question, maybe raise your hand, of course. Then if you can stand while posing the question, you've already got the routine. And then briefly introduce yourself for Sir James as well. Maybe we can take 2 or 3 questions together, and then you can respond. Please.
Thank you very much, President. I come from China, and actually before I came to New York, I stayed in Washington for 2 days, and I attended a meeting in Pew Research Center, and they actually have research and survey, and the survey said that American people do not say China favorably. So right now, Xi Jinping, President of China, visited the United States. I don't know what do you view of this event. It is an important moment in the history.
It's a very, very important question,
Yeah.
and I think I can attempt to answer it.
Thank you.
I hope you're happy with it. As a matter of fact, 18 months ago, I shared a platform in Guangzhou with Bill Clinton representing the United States, Kevin Rudd representing Australia, President Lee of Korea representing Southeast Asia, and Tony Blair, UK and Europe. Myself, I was invited to represent Africa and the Indian Ocean. Now China is 1/4 of humanity. The Chinese factor in the future cannot be ignored. You ignore it at your peril. So the way China moves forward is relevant to all of us. Some months ago I was in Sri Lanka. I was having breakfast with 2 businessmen of a big corporation in China called Huawei. And they asked me a question similar to what you're asking. They said, "Sir James, how does the world view the economic growth of China, China's recent economic performance?" I told them, "My friend, the world is very impressed with performers. However, the world is saying we have known Chinese ping-pong diplomacy, we have known Chinese smiling diplomacy, but do we know about Chinese arrogance? They are concerned, the world is concerned, because all nations are concerned if you've reached a situation that you are not displaced, or at least that you can guarantee what you have known. Now these two Chinese, one of them said, Sir James said, look at this, Gucci suits. My suit, also Italian made, my tie Valentino. He said, do you think that we, myself for example, I came from very, very poor background. And I know what poverty, abject poverty is all about. Do you think that now, through the climate of free change and peace, we have been able to build up such an economy that we want to take the risk to go to war? Because unless there's peace, we cannot trade. So I thought they had a point, a very valid point, and I see that the President of China is now arriving, and I'm glad that there is a dialogue, but there is a point which concerns me, is the need for the world to move away from the politics of might is right. What do I mean by this? Well, political might is right. You see the US tomorrow developing another weapons or a more superior aircraft carrier. Then what do we see? The Chinese also following up. First we see a situation, when you look at the global village, where so much of the world resources, so much is being spent on the defense budget. A Deputy Secretary General of NATO told me, when I asked him this question in Berlin, at a meeting of cultural diplomacy, he said the world is spending 30 times more on defense budget as opposed to human resource development. Just imagine what we could do with all this money. New universities, new reservoir, new electricity, etc. So I think we all very happy to see China. We like China to come up, the people to be happy. And I think in one way Chinese have already won the peace, as illustrated by a story, just something which somebody told me only a few days ago. I met this friend of mine in Canada, and whenever I went to Canada, I love to enjoy eating lobsters there. I told my friend, he said, I'd like to come again, then we'll go and eat lobsters. And he said, yes, my friend, but you know what's happening? The Chinese are importing all the lobsters. You see? So don't import all, leave some behind for the Canadian people. Thank you.
See, many questions. Let's say to me two more, because we're actually out of time, but it's such a special honor to have you here. Let's take at least two more, maybe one from this side and then one from this side. Again, here you were first on the front. Okay.
My name is Dalis, I'm from Benin. I work here in the city in finance and accounting. I have a question about the connection between election cycle and socio-economic progress. So usually in our country, and I mean Africa, South Asia, and Latin America, the people reduce democracy to the election. And you can see that first of all, when the officials are elected, they are more focused on how to get re-elected. And also when elections are organized, there are occasion for a rise in violence. So based on your experience, what are the formula that work, and what is the connection you see between the election cycle and socio-economic progress in our countries?
If we can, Sir James, let's take one more, and then maybe you can respond to both at once.
No, it's better we answer the question, and then, yeah, they could be tangent apart. Well, you have got a very important question. Now, when I returned to Seychelles, I was the leader of the party, was deposed, and then I founded the party. But then I realized that we are not going to move ahead in that country if all of us remained at the level of politicians. What Africa needs, and many parts of the world needs, we need more statesmen. A statesman is interested in transformation of the country. He is interested in the next generation. The politician is interested in the next election. So he plays to the tune of rising expectation. And sometimes will promise the electorate more than what he knows the country will never be able to deliver. Right? So there's too much irresponsibility, and I think there again we must review all this, and we know what happened in many parts of Africa. Then once you're elected, then you believe you've been elected for life, and then you are in control of the army, right? And one sad thing about Africa, I've got a lot of friends there, I've been going there, is that a lot of people who were educated in terms of able to lead the country democratically have been killed by coup d'etat. And we have a lot of nations which is being ruled under military culture, ruled by people who were surgeons, and then they made coup d'etat and made themselves brigadier. People who knows the MNOP but are not aware of the ABCD. There is such a problem. And how do you get a country, for example, which has been under military rule for 15, 20 years, to overnight go back to democratic government? You know, that's one of the big problems with Nigeria. That is why we're very happy to have the setup. But who do we see now bringing democracy? It's somebody who was himself a military man made by a coup d'etat.
Okay, final question. I'm not sure which one was first. I'll leave it to you guys.
Additional
Okay,
question.
next time you can go. Okay.
I'm asking this Professor Info from Russian People Friendship University and
From?
president of African diaspora in Russia and CIA region. My question is this. What do you think? What kind of democracy we need in Africa? Democracy for people or democracy for leadership? You understand? Because I think the leadership is not free. We need democracy for leadership.
Well, yes, you got a very pertinent question for which the answer must be left to you people in your own nation to determine against the background of the circumstances of your case. But in my view, sometimes a good benevolent dictatorship can bring forward more progress rather than, one man, one vote democracy, because decision has got to be taken urgently in Africa. And that is the sort of point which Museveni of Uganda is trying to make, because he is a dictator, but there's been a lot of progress under his dictatorship, right? This, of course, is not going to satisfy his opposition, who will cry, well, violation of human rights. But this question must be answered by our African friends in their own country, against the background of their own circumstances. Because, okay, we can go back to a simple life. And if we recognize the value of the simple life, as I was saying before, well, there was Africa had their own setup. It was ruled by chiefs who were also perhaps elected in each of the areas. But then we have brought in our notion of democracy. And does it work? When you see what's happening in the States today, the champion of the democratic world, yet internally there's two political parties who hate each other, right? Producers, people like some of the potential leaders who speaks a lot of damn nonsense and interfere with the sentiments of a great sector of the population. I mean, there's a question in terms of democracy, I believe, which is being posed in this very nation now, because you can see the way bipartisan politics is playing. Either you're with us or you're against us, right? Now, for example, you got the long gun lobby issue. I may be a Republican, but I may not wish to support the gun lobby policy. But the group who rules the country take the view either you are with us or against us. So you belong to us, then you got to support it. Well, my question is that right democracy?
Okay, well, on that note, Sir James, we are out of time. And the second round of